Welcome to the Jacksonville Momcast, a podcast dedicated to telling the real stories of local Jacksonville moms. Sponsored by Jacksonville Beach Moms, each month we'll cover topics to help you navigate mom life on the First Coast. Thanks for joining us as we tackle all things motherhood and more with a focus on the 904. Welcome. Today we have Kate DeValerio and Amanda Vargas, and they are the moms behind Bold Child Company. And so let's start by you guys telling us a little bit about yourselves.
I'm Amanda. I'm the OT part of our business. I do OT feeding and lactation for us. And I'm a mom of two. I have an almost 4-year-old and a 7-month-old.
And I'm Kate. I'm the pediatric physical therapist for Bold Child Co. I am a mom of two. I have an 8-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. I'm also an adoptive mama, so I have a huge passion area there. And then I specialize in a lot of our developmental play, as well as torticollis and flathead syndrome.
And so tell us a little bit about Bold Child Company.
I think Bold Child Company was born out of, Kate and I worked together for 6 or 7 years. And both of us, we were ready to make that leap into private practice. And I think we were both ready at the exact same time. So when Kate sat down to talk to me about this, I had already had a full write-up ready to go because it was something that I had been thinking of too. And the more and more we spoke about it, the more our vision for what this company, what we wanted it to look like, it was really the same thing. And so we were like, there's no reason for both of us to do this. We should be doing this together. We'll serve more people if we kind of join forces and do it together. And so that's how we kind of got started.
And Bold Child Co. was really born out of a recognition that there was a huge service gap in the Jacksonville area for specific families. So we do a lot of things really well in Jacksonville. We're certainly not trying to be any of the big companies who already do that mainstream therapy well. We recognized that there were two main service gaps. One was concierge therapy, which includes a large umbrella of things all the way from cash-based services where the patient and family becomes a much bigger voice in their care because we cut out insurance's voice in that, which is huge when it comes to really being able to streamline your goals and target them in a way that makes sense to the client and the therapist, as opposed to having to make it make sense in the algorithm that also results in insurance coverage. Doesn't mean that stops you from being able to submit for insurance coverage. That's a whole nother talk. But what it does mean is that we're able to hit the goals a little bit more liberally and throw all of our resources at it, as opposed to making it fit in a box that works for insurance. So that was the one service gap. And the other side of concierge is that we also offer two different ways to get to us. You can either come to us in a clinic setting or we can come to you. So, a lot of our young families with itty bitty babies, especially in the pandemic, but just in general, a lot of people don't want to take out their itty bitty baby.
That's very appealing.
It's huge, to have somebody who can come and see you in your home. It's also huge for families who maybe have been in therapy for a long time and have struggled achieving goals because it happens really well in the clinic in the four walls of a medical setting, but then you go to practice it at home and it just doesn't translate. And so, we're in their homes and helping translate that clinic knowledge into functional knowledge that can happen in their home. So that was the one service gap. The other service gap was people in this town weren't doing tethered oral tissue and torticollis well.
Right.
And that's a huge medical area right now for our newborns. Almost everybody knows someone whose child has been in a helmet or who has had their tongue tied clipped. Mm-hmm. And those kids oftentimes are overlooked for the actual therapy component that can, the cause of why we had the flathead syndrome, or you had that tongue clipped because there was a functional problem. You don't just go clip a tongue on a baby who's otherwise doing well. They weren't feeding well. So, why would we expect this newborn to then know what to do with all this range of motion that they now have in their tongue? So, that was the other service gap. And that's where Bold Child Co. just kind of naturally came together.
So you did mention each of your kind of specialties, but tell us a little bit about why each of you chose the specific type of therapies that you chose to specialize in.
Well, I've been an OT for 11 years, 10, 11 years. And I think probably 7 or 8 of those I've been specializing in feeding. And it just happened to be actually like a service gap in where I was treating an outpatient. There was no one at the clinic that wanted to do it. And as a young grad, I was like, I will go learn how to do that. So I took a bunch of continuing education and it became a real passion area for me, working with those picky eaters and the problem feeders and all of that stuff. That became like my thing. I loved doing that. But then I noticed as I kept going and as I was getting these referrals, my referrals were getting younger and younger and younger, which I loved because way easier to make change at 6 months versus 18 months or 3. But a lot of times with those 6-month-olds, there was a breastfeeding component as well. Or I kept seeing that if I was getting the 4, 5, or 6-month-olds for bottle feeding, it was because mom usually was unable to breastfeed. They had a horrible time, that baby couldn't latch, or I was in a ton of pain, or I didn't have supply because baby wasn't feeding well, or something like that. There was always this like historical component of some sort of lactation difficulty. And then I was seeing these babies. And so I took that on, and as an occupational therapist was kind of treating the lactation component too. But I got to the point where I was doing so much of it that I felt like I really needed to go and get more lactation specific education. And so probably during like around COVID time, I went and got my certification in breastfeeding specialist, and hoping to sit for IBCLC. Hopefully by next year, I'll have the hours to do that. But that's kind of how it just was a very like organic. The feeding just kept getting younger and younger. And then, I noticed that those problems were going hand in hand. And then I noticed that I was getting pulled in a lot for babies that Kate was seeing with torticollis. And we just kind of started seeing this like overlap, which is how we got to where we are today.
So as a physical therapist, my drive to go into my specific specialty just relates to personal experience. As a child, I had physical therapy, and I went through 6 rounds of physical therapy for the same condition. And reflecting back on that, once I hit PT school, I realized that there was a real big understanding gap of where I was at as a child, because I was going to just a general outpatient clinic where they did everything. And they weren't necessarily hearing me as a child who might not describe it the same way, or who needed you to be creative with the exercises, because I wasn't going to go home and do straight leg raises. So I learned a lot about why somebody needed to specialize in pediatrics through my own personal experience. And then I married into a family where 2 of my bonus cousins have a condition called spinal muscular atrophy. And I went to college with my older cousin and got to do a lot of the therapy processes with her, and the medical equipment, like acquiring medical equipment. Got to see those hurdles, got to see people who were really fantastic and loved kids, and people who really shouldn't be involved with kids whatsoever, and realized I was a people who should be involved with kids and really loved kids. And then, fast forward to having been out and being a pediatric clinician, my son was born with severe torticollis, which was just, kind of a little joke on me of things coming full circle, because I'd worked with peds for several years before having my own child, and hadn't really specialized in anything. It was just a general pediatric PT, which is funny to say that that's not a specialty, because that in itself is is defined as a specialty, but there's really too much to know if you're going to do it all. And so when my son had torticollis, I realized why a lot of my torticollis cases weren't getting better, because it's hard to work those exercises in, and there's just more to it than the neck. We were having feeding problems, we were having latching issues, we were having a flat head syndrome that was going on. And honestly, to have my own child out in the community, when I said I treated that with a flat head syndrome, was embarrassing, and made me work really hard at it. And I got to really appreciate where those parents were struggling, and how hard it was to be not only a mom but a new mom. And so when I came back from maternity leave, I really, set my laser focus on torticollis. Still hadn't had the feeding issues resolved, was getting a lot of the answers that thankfully Amanda now is the solution to many of them, or at least can point you to the solution of. But with the feeding, I went back to work as a mom who was really struggling with the nursing aspect of feeding my child and was having to pump around the clock. And we were still trying to address this torticollis that I felt like if he lived with me as a peds PT who knew how to treat it, it should have been better, but it just wasn't getting better. And you know, now looking back at that with the thing that our collaborative knowledge has, I realized that we knew he had a tongue tie, but the doctor kept telling us, oh, it's a little tongue tie. It's not a problem tongue tie. Oh, he's gaining weight. Oh, he's in good hands with you as a PT. But it turns out, you know, there was a stage where they should have said like, hey, you should go see a lactation specialist, or hey, maybe an ENT should look at that tongue. And because of the fact that we now know that tethered oral tissue comes from the tip of the tongue and goes all the way down to the toes, we'll see some kids with who are toe walkers that had a tongue tie as a child, or maybe didn't have it revised as a child. You know, it all makes sense to me now as to why it was a 6-month uphill battle around the clock to address his torticollis. And we never honestly got to the root of his feeding issues until he was a much older child. I mean, early elementary school age was when we finally didn't struggle with our feeding anymore. So that's how, you know, it started as a very personal experience for myself as a young child who was misunderstood with PT, but then became kind of my own soapbox of, oh my gosh, I was doing this completely wrong, telling all these moms to go home and do 100 interventions a day and not being realistic at how to do those. And also not looking outside of the neck of the baby. You know, I was just looking at this neck and like, okay, go stretch, go do these stretches, you know, like this should be getting better. And, you know, a lot of my cases did, 7 out of 10 of them probably did get better, but those 3 out of 10, I was like, man, that mom's just not prioritizing things. Or, you know, we just have a lens of like, I'm giving you all the stuff that's worked for other cases. I don't know why it's not here. And it was just such a huge aha moment as Amanda and I started pulling each other in on these cases and started finding research that supports what we do of, you know, marrying that tethered oral tissue and the torticollis and flathead syndrome treatment all together, with a few other things that we also now know to look at. We both know to look outside of the area that, you know, mom and dad come and present the problem for in the first place now.
And then we get better outcomes.
Much better outcomes, shorter stays, and actually achieving the goals, which is lovely.
That's awesome that you guys are such a good partnership together with your different and yet not so different. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned working with babies and a little bit with some elementary age kids, but what type of ages do you typically service?
We go all the way through elementary school, and then there are certainly other exceptions that we see. We also treat specifically at one school in town, and I see all the way through their middle school, and I even have like done some of their high school students that need some adaptations. So we still are the traditional occupational therapy, physical therapy for those elementary age kids too.
We definitely have our niche in the TOTS and the tethered oral tissue, but one really big advantage to having worked in the corporate therapy world for a long time is that we got really good at a lot of things, and there's some things we got really great at. So, you know, we do a bold beginnings or a discovery call. Sorry, not a bold beginnings. We do a discovery call with all of our families before they ever set foot in our office. And that is our time to learn a little bit more about the child. We spend about 15 minutes talking with the family before we take them in for an evaluation. And that lets us determine if the goals that they're approaching a therapist for fits well with what we know we do well. And that stops us from feeling like, you know, hey, we already collected your copay and did this evaluation, so we just need to keep everybody on our caseload, that we kind of felt working for a big company. You know, that allows us to say, you know what, there's somebody else here in town who does that better really well than us. And we're very comfortable saying that. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't claim to do everything perfectly. We definitely do development very well. Yeah. And we do development very well. You know, if you're coming to us with something that was a developmental condition, whether you're 5 minutes old, 5 weeks old, 5 years old, or 15, we know what to do and we know how to do it well. You know, but if you're coming to us maybe as a multiple traumas client who's in 6th grade, you may want to be with a sports therapist who, you know, chats through the flag football team you want to get back to, which Amanda and I don't understand outside of screaming for our own children on the sidelines. So we're very comfortable saying what we do well and what we don't do well. So the best way to know if we think we can help you is to give us a call, and then we give you a call. Mm-hmm.
And you touched on your welcome call. Talk us through the evaluation process. As a parent, if I am coming to you with some concerns, what does that look like in terms of, you mentioned your call, getting to know my child, and then talk us through like the evaluation and coming up with a plan.
So I think for, since we do several different things, if it is a feeding or a lactation eval, my evals we start with that whole body, that whole baby. Like Kate was saying, it's something that's kind of missed in other lactation services, I think sometimes. So I'm looking from top of the head to tip of the toes of that child. And we'll get all of your history, just like you would a typical eval, but then we're going to do a weighted feed. We're going to see how baby's eating, or if it's a picky eater, we're going to do a full, we're going to eat. Mom's bringing foods that they love, foods that they don't love. We're going to walk all the way through both of those things and, give a really good assessment. Sometimes our evals take over an hour because we have the ability in concierge therapy to spend that extra time with the parents. A lot of times baby has child has a complex history and the parents want to share that. And that's something that we can do with our practice model. So getting all of that history and making our plan. And I think Kate kind of touched on it earlier, but our model is not to see your child 2 times a week for 24 weeks. That's sort of typical in, like Kate was saying, corporate therapy world. But in our concierge model, we really want to see you establish a really strong home exercise program and be here for you as you implement those goals and those changes in their environment, in their natural environment. So typically both of our plans usually start out weekly, and we love to progress off of that. We love to progress to every other week. We love monthly, every other month check-in. A lot of times I'm seeing these infants shortly after birth, 2, 3, 6 weeks. And then I love seeing them at 6 months and making sure that they start solids well. And I'm there for that parent and for that mom to be that support. And we're there in the meantime too. And that's part of concierge therapy. We're also always available. If we do say, go out and try this home exercise program, we're available to tweak that and be their ears while they're doing that too.
Tag teaming on what Amanda said, and an evaluation, although it does have a lot of variability as to what you're coming in for, there are a few things that you can expect from Bold Child Co. every single time. One is you have an hour carved out for you and your child to voice your concerns, tell us about the functional issues that made you say, hey, we should see therapy. We're going to tell you how we can partner with you to help your child. We're going to give you access to us immediately. You're going to have our cell phone numbers, our emails. A lot of times we're providing people with some of our social media posts and things like that to access our personal exercise libraries. You're also going to receive a visit recap that we send within 72 hours of the appointment that explains in parent first language, this is what's going on with your child. This is how long we're going to see them. This is what you can explain to grandma who may be thinking you are being crazy, even seeking services for this. We love our grandmas, but man, they always think those grandbabies are perfect.
Grandma's for school.
Grandma in school. Yeah.
Daycare. Also,
but it's a great handout that's it's branded out, of course, because we like our branded out stuff, but it's got images in there of if we throw a lot of medical terms at parents, oh, it's your sternocleidomastoid, oh, it's your buccal ties, oh, it's your this, it's your that. And in that handout, we take an opportunity to provide photos like this is the sternocleidomastoid muscle. It's highlighted in red and there's arrows to it. And so we get a lot of feedback from our parents that, the evaluation process seemed like it made sense when they were sitting in front of us, and then they walked out and somebody said, oh, how'd it go? What's going on with the child? And they weren't able always to articulate back, oh, this is what's going on, because we give so much information. And then that handout comes and it's like, this is what was going on. I have this, great breakdown of what the girls at Bold Child Co. think is happening. There's all these active links on the handout that they can just click on, and it immediately takes them to, a mom support group for that condition, or a product we think would help them with their therapy to make it easier, or, an Instagram post that refers back to how to schedule those things out. And I think something we consistently got throughout our career was because we're so education based and empowering parent based, sometimes that can be a very overwhelming experience day one, which we try to dial back as much as possible. But we also want parents to, we get excited, and we don't want you to walk out with, a lot of pieces missing in the puzzle. We try to give that whole puzzle and then re-give it to you over the next few visits. And that handout, though, now that we give, kind of acts as a bridge between that, so that parents can be like, this is what's happening. Here it is in handout form. Dad
wasn't at the eval, but here you go. Yeah.
So those are some things that you can expect to get from us every single time, regardless of if you're coming for feeding or vestibular issues or developmental issues, or your baby has a flat head, or they do what has now been coined as the janky crawl, or any of those types of things. You're going to have some consistent things that you come in and experience and then walk out the door with. And then from there on, you've got Amanda and I in your back pocket until you divorce us.
Yeah, I actually had a mom texting me tonight of someone I've discharged months ago, but wanted to give an update. So, which is great. Always welcome. I love to hear that they're doing well.
That's so awesome. That's great that people keep up with you. I love that. So thinking about new moms who are already second guessing, everything as a new mom, I know I did. If they think there might be a need for some type of therapy, what is your recommendation in terms of how long do you wait? Is it better to come in and find out as soon as possible? I think I know what your answer is going to be, but talk us through that, like first time, new mom, totally unsure, how much Googling do you do versus go ahead and make an appointment?
We practice check and see instead of wait and see at Bold Child Co. So we kind of flipped wait and see on its head, because of the fact that for those individuals where therapy was going to be needed, wait and see means the longer you wait, the longer you're in therapy to address it, or potentially the less promising the outcome can be. So we've kind of hybridized that, where we now offer something called the Bold Beginnings track at Bold Child Co. And what that is you can come to us, you can literally say, I don't even think anything's wrong. I just want my child to have a well check with a therapist each year. We go for a well check with our dentist, we go for a well check with our pediatrician. So, play is the occupation of the child, and that's what we do. You have an annual performance review with your boss, and we're the baby's bosses. We do a performance review with them through that. And so you can come to us either where you're like, I might be crazy and I just want you to check. We do a developmental screener in all of those cases that helps the parents see how their child's performance compares to peers who are otherwise considered to be typically developing. And then in that scenario, literally in any scenario, one of our favorite things to say to you is congrats on being proactive. We don't see any problems right now. Right. That is not something we have a problem saying. We don't pick up 100% of our cases.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think to that new mom that's just questioning, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, or the pediatrician's saying wait and see, and they still have that mom gut that's like, I don't know, like this doesn't seem right. I'm not sure. We're not going to recommend therapy if we don't think that it's necessary. And so I think the best case scenario is you come in there and, like Kate said, we're like, congrats, everything looks really good. Or, hey, I do kind of see what you're talking about, but here's a bunch of exercises. I don't think you have to come back every week. Here's a bunch of exercises. Check in with me in a month and let me know how it's going. See if that problem still persists. If you still feel like it does, then maybe we'll come back and redo it. But here's some things developmentally that we can do that you can do at home with baby or a young kid. And let's see if just that alone helps. And that's, I think, really empowering to some moms. Like they have something they can do about something that they have a concern for.
Yeah, nobody walks out without something in hand to do. As a mom, you don't really prepare for what we have to offer, but what we have to offer makes your life a lot easier. We can teach you how to do tummy time without your baby screaming through it, or different positions to make feeding a little bit easier, or, you name it. Yeah. If we don't have a resource for it, we'll find the resource for you. So it's definitely, the check and see is our favorite. I just did a follow-up today with a baby where the parents were their parent gut was kicking in, but they kept being reassured by providers and by, elders that they respected that everything was fine and the child would just grow out of it. And we actually missed the window that we like to see that child in to guarantee the outcome that the family was looking for. And it relates to flat head syndrome. And they were very disappointed because they'd been asking providers for months and months and months about this. And they really wished they would have done the check and see approach earlier. And, that's not coming down on them. They finally did the check and see, which is great. But it can be really discouraging to know that your gut was telling you something was there and you just didn't know you had access to something like a Bold Beginnings where we could just check and see and maybe, give you a little assistance a lot earlier on, as opposed to an uphill battle that you have to run now.
Yeah, I think that's been the best part too about private practice is it's something called direct access. So you don't need a physician referral. You don't need a specialist referral. You can just give us a call. So it takes out some of that wait time too that we were experiencing before.
And I love the idea of the therapy well check. And I think back to like when my kids were little and were at the pediatrician's office and they had that checklist they run through. Is he holding his own fork? Is he, speaking 10 words? Is he pulling up? But they never, hardly ever watched them perform those tasks. So, you check them off. And so, yes, as a first-time mom, my child is fantastic and does all those things, but there might be something more going on there that you don't realize. And since nobody who's been trained has watched him do it, you don't know until later, until you, like you said, until you miss that window.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not to fault the physicians, I mean, they get their training to keep our children thriving and surviving, right? And then they assess your child in a very small room with a very limited amount of time. So if you're like, no problem, the pediatrician's like, no problem, great. And that's no fault of their own. A lot of very fantastic physicians are doing that. But, when we put them in a big open space and look at function and just observe them, one thing therapists or occupational physical speech, ABBAs and things like that are really good about doing is observing the child before asking the questions. And we have the time to do that. We get an hour. That's much more time than 10 to 15 minutes, which is, physician expectation for productivity. So we get the opportunity to really look at the child, observe what's going on and say, hey, we can do this, but we don't do this in a way that is very energy efficient or, grasp is a huge thing that Amanda winds up getting, my son included. We're like, his letter formation's atrocious, but he could write the letters. And as a busy mom, even though I'm a PT, the first time I ever looked at his letter formation, he was in first grade and Amanda was like, leave it alone. It's functional.
At this point, we're not going back.
And you're like, well, I wish somebody would have, they just asked me, can he write 5 letters? Legibly. Yeah, sure, he does. Yeah. But it takes him a long time right now to do it.
And when you think about those well checks too, I had one of my kids was a very healthy child. And so we were literally a year between pediatrician visits. So it's like, you're not even seeing them that often if you're not in there for a medical need.
Right. Yep. It's so true. In my ideal world, once you get to those yearly, you would see us at the 6-month mark.
Nice. So in that in between.
A lot can happen in a year. We do those time hops all the time on Facebook, and it shows us that all the time. Social media is really good at showing us how much can change in a year. But if you think about the fact that like maybe there was something that was already in the back of your mind as a parent at that 7-year well check, and the next time you go is an 8-year well check, that problem has not just brewed. I mean, it's flat out, it only takes 9 months to birth a baby. And so here we are a whole year later, like that problem has manifested. So it'd be lovely if we saw them at like a 6-month mark from their well checks as just okay, how are things going?
Yeah. Some moms not having an appointment just for like the concern. So then it does get put off till the next one.
Absolutely. So let's talk about COVID. How has COVID impacted your practice? You mentioned the going into the homes. How has the last couple of years really kind of impacted how you service families? And at the same time, have you noticed more families looking for services in the last couple of years? Kind of almost like what you said, for a while, our kids were home like all the time, doing schoolwork at the kitchen table. And I mean, as a mom, I observed a lot of things that,
I was gonna say, as an occupational therapist at the beginning of COVID, when all the moms had to sit at the table with their kids, I got a ton of referrals because the moms were like, oh my gosh, this is what you're doing this is how you do this, or they can't pay attention to do this work, or they're, fighting me tooth and nail to do this handwriting or the coloring, or should they be coloring better? Like that beginning of COVID where we finally got to kind of see what their school day looked like really benefited me a lot. I helped a lot of elementary school kids at that point.
Not PT. So COVID birthed our business.
Practice,
we didn't exist pre-COVID, and we were very happy in our corporate roles as PT, OT. We had a lot of job satisfaction there, and then COVID hit, and it made us realize the service gaps that were out there. Some of our kids who really, really needed us went to teletherapy. We continued operating with the company that we worked for. We never closed down for a day because we were considered essential workers. But, as the world locked down, a lot of our families with children who really needed the services were very cautious, which we completely appreciated. But once they finally came back into the clinic 9-10 months later, we'd lost so much skill or hadn't gained any ground. And here we were having, been shut down. And then these kids were also advancing a grade at this point too, when they were finally coming back in, and everybody was like, whoa, what did we do to these, this group of children that are already, you have to advocate for vigorously in order for them to get access to the right amount of services. Or we were also getting babies who were 9-10 months old.
That's what I was going to say.
Who had not sought services for a problem because, the parents didn't want them out in the community where this big unknown was happening.
Or well checks were done virtually.
Yes.
So there were no people putting direct eyes on on them.
Yeah. And I was going to say that too. We had literally everything pushed back. I mean, dental visits, well check visits, any follow-up you had for any medical condition was pushed back. Everything was pushed back.
That's true. I would say it was like it was a burst of like 9 to 11-month-old babies that like weren't sitting, very flat heads, weren't eating solid foods, were struggling with solid. We got a bunch right at the same time, and I think that is what happened.
And Amanda and I were just screaming into a wind tunnel, but we're not the type of people to present a problem without presenting a solution. And there we were, kind of knocked on our rears, constantly discussing a problem that we didn't see a solution for. And that was because the service model
we couldn't go
wasn't there. I mean, if it was there for extremely medically complex kids, and that wasn't necessarily who was being missed, because their services a lot of times continued. And we do service the very, very medically complex, and we enjoy that population. But we were looking at the kids who could get pushed off. And I say that in air quotes because you really can't push off anything. These kids don't get another today. There's an Eminem song that I quote all the time that I have to be careful because, the words get a little bit rough, but it says you only got one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. And that's literally every day for a kid, because so much happens in those first 18 months of life where literally if we don't use that neural connection, our brain like clips it, like actually cuts it off. And we have double the amount of connections in our brain, I want to say, by the time we hit between 1 and 2 years of age than we do as an adult. So if you think about the fact that it's not even the full volume that we have as an adult, but there's more connections going on there, some of those connections obviously have to get cut, or what's called pruned, as we don't use that skill that could potentially be connected. And so, there's a really key point. And I think sheltering that age demographic isn't going to go away. I probably shouldn't call it sheltering, but I think, doing things virtually is going to stay around for a good long while. I know when I just called to schedule my children's 4 and 9-year well checks, they offered me a virtual option. I think we learned a lot as a healthcare industry, and we know that there's greater access if we offer multiple pathways. But I also think it's going to do a disservice to some of our families where there's not physical eyes getting laid on them, or they don't, because things have gotten so busy and a lot of things got pushed off for 2 years. There's a lot of parents who are making up that gap right now and don't necessarily have time to drive to a therapy clinic for their child to get a 30-minute session, but they do have 40 minutes to open the door, let us in for a 30-minute session, kick us out the door, and get back to life.
Yeah.
So,
because a lot of our parents also are still working from home.
Yeah.
So there does seem to be like a lot of, right. That doesn't seem to be going away there. So there's a lot of flexibility. I feel like we have a lot of in-home clients that could have benefited from this model during COVID.
Yeah. At our house, my husband's working from home evidently forever. So, so yes, we do know a lot of the families we know are I guess never going back to an office.
No, my husband left and will never go back full time to an office. And, that creates an interesting dynamic because while the workday theoretically got shorter, it now spills into your entire day and can be done at any time of day. And I think a lot of our families who have gained more flexibility have also lost a lot of the opportunity to leave for 2 hours because now they don't necessarily wrap up at 4 because something got pushed off from 10 till 12 because we needed to do XYZ. So I'm finding we're meeting a lot of our families' needs, because they were still able then to do something with older brother from 10 till 12. And then we come in and they just take their, 30-minute mom or dad takes a 30-minute lunch break and is able to spend that time with the child and get their therapy in. And now they're not having to choose between one child getting therapy and one child going to swim lessons. There's just such a huge shift in family dynamic overall that's here to stay, where a concierge model can really meet you where you're at. And then there's also just that busy mom lifestyle that was here before and just keeps getting busier and busier.
Isn't going anywhere.
Yeah. It's just going to keep, the expectations are going to continue mounting, that we're able to come in and provide some sort of a solution for that. Crazy.
It's nice. It's nice to be able to adapt to all different families. Like you said, some can come in, you can go into them, because it's really, you're right. It's the landscape of how the family operates has changed forever, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about your Bold Beginnings resource. You touched on it a little bit, but what's it all about? And then talk to us a little bit about what some of your favorite gifts and toys are for developmental play.
So our Bold Beginnings that Kate had spoke about before was really one of those service gaps that we wanted to address. Sometimes there are things that are not necessarily so extreme or delayed that they would have been covered by insurance in our previous positions, but there are things that we know that we do well as far as like coaching parents through development or coaching them through the next stage. And that coaching we felt like really wasn't offered anywhere. And so that's our Bold Beginnings track. So it's that feeling that you were talking about before, that like mom gut feeling. I think something might be wrong. Can you just check? Or, I don't think anything's wrong, but so-and-so said that I should look at this. Can you check this out and tell me what you think? We get a lot of that. And it's just been a really nice, those are the parents that we put on the not necessarily weekly therapy track, but here's a bunch of stuff. Here are our favorite products to do. These are some exercises you can do. Let me know in a couple weeks how it's going. And that's really refreshing to parents too, because I think they don't have to sign up for anything. It can just be the check and that's it. And that's nice.
We get a ton of not tolerating tummy time or not knowing how to do it, or even just being scared of putting baby on the belly. That's definitely a side effect of the Back to Sleep program. We also get a lot of, hey, my baby's having trouble learning how to sit or having trouble learning how to crawl, and maybe isn't delayed, but mom and dad are recognizing like, I don't know, like this isn't clicking with us, and mom and dad don't know how to help it, so they come in, they get some activities, they get product recommendations like you asked, and we have a really nice resource that we direct all of our clients to, but specifically for our Bold Beginnings resources that we compiled around the holidays this year, and it's a developmental shopping guide, and it goes in some nice monthly age blocks in early childhood, and then starting around either 2 or 2.5, it goes to annual ages. where it has kind of our hot button toys and also has a little like, here's what you can do with it next to it as well. And that's on our blog. You can find it at boldchildco.com/blog. It's on there as our ultimate holiday shopping guide, but really is our kind of our ultimate resource for what we love, all the way from which spoons we use down to the type of stomp rocket that I like to use with my 8-year-old to work on jumping and single leg standing. So that's a great resource to go find all of our favorites on there.
And we'll put a link to that in our show notes so that people can find it easily. So it's summer here in Jacksonville. It was extremely hot out today. And I know a lot of moms like water play and are always looking for fun summertime activities to keep the kids busy, but also keep them cool. What are some of your favorite summertime activities as therapists, but also as moms, to kind of keep the kids like cool and active and off the screens?
Mm-hmm. Water beads in the in the plastic kiddie pool is definitely one of our big go-tos. Different sensory bins that can also be kept inside. You can use a fitted sheet turned inside out and stick that kid in the living room with a sensory bin full of rice or pinto beans and hide different things in it. Are great, indoor.
Any kitchen utensil makes that really fun. Something they don't normally maybe get to use, a big ladle, tongs, things like that keep it kind of entertaining for them.
I have a few favorite indoor locations, just as somebody who looks at the development side of things. The Cummer has a great kid zone that has a lot of different things that the kids can move around on. There's big physical structure play. They always have something really great going on, and they have a free Friday every month. So if you don't want to spend the money to take your kid to a museum, because it's only going to last 75 minutes at the most, which is a success in my book, depending on the age of your kids, there's gardens they can run around in if it is nice outside, and then they can go inside and do the big gross motor play and some art activities, learn a little bit about art history. And then Mosh has a great developmental playground, all indoors. Mosh is a favorite for us that we have a membership to, and I definitely think they have done it very well for an alternative to beat the heat. That really keeps the kids engaged. They've always got some sort of great thing happening on the second floor where you can go and have your kids explore and learn something while they're at it.
We're big library fans.
Yep.
Because of the age difference right now that I'm kind of stuck in with the baby and then a very active toddler, 3-year-old preschooler. I can strap the baby on. It's air conditioned, and in the kids sections, and I've been in several Jacksonville libraries, mostly the ones close by us, but the kids sections are great, and there's always so much more than just books to do in there. And I think it's like a really missed opportunity. There's a ton of toys. There's free, usually like wall play stuff. There's the one by us keeps crayons and paper out on the table. It's been a really nice resource for me postpartum. And then as I'm thinking about the summer where I don't want to be in the heat with the baby, that's probably where you're going to find us. Yep. It's free.
Yeah. My kids used to love the puzzles at the library.
Yeah.
Yes. Some of them, we had the same puzzles at home and it didn't matter. But if we went to the library, they would do all the puzzles at the library. Mm-hmm. And the downtown library is so nice because it has that big courtyard in the middle. So when it's nice out, you can sit outside, you can have lunch in the courtyard upstairs by the children's section. And then they also have like all sorts of free activities going on all summer long.
For families who are interested, we keep a guide on our Instagram of our favorite places to play. So it has all those little blurbs about Mosh and the Cummer. It also has our hit list of our favorite parks. Huffman Park has historically been our favorite for the fully accessible playground for families with multiple needs, as well as if you're just going with a stroller. But now the new Sunshine Park is also fantastic as far as access for multiple abilities. And then it's got that great splash pad. And then the Hannah Park splash pad has been redone, as well as the playground. So those are kind of our favorite outdoor areas to go meet the developmental needs of a family that might have some neurodiversity going on, and at least still enjoy our Florida outdoors, because even though it's 98 degrees, I think most of us are finding ourselves outside still.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jacksonville has such an amazing park system. I mean, seriously, we're out at the beach, so we love sunshine, but I have a friend who lives over in the Orange Park area, and they love the Clark House Park, which is very similar to Sunshine, but it's on the other side of town. So yeah, it really seems like no matter where you live, there's a great park not that far away from you. So what's your favorite thing about being a mom in Jacksonville?
Kate's from Jacksonville. I'm not from Jacksonville, but I've been here 11 years. And I, even not being from here, I feel like Jacksonville gives you this, like, it's a big city with such a small town feel. I really feel like everywhere we go, there's someone we know, or it's very welcoming, and there's another group of moms there that's willing to kind of, show you the ropes and what's going on, or invite you to come to their next, we're here every Friday, or whatever it might be. It just seems like it's a really, like you said, there's so many resources that we have, like, as a bigger city, but it still feels like such a small community once you have kids in this city. It's really nice.
So my favorite thing about being a mom in Jacksonville, number one, is the fact that like Amanda said, I'm from here. So I literally live between, like, my in-laws, my parents, and my sister, which is lovely because as a mom, we all need a huge support network, like Amanda touched on. But without that, my absolute favorite thing as a mom is all of the different weekend activities that we have going on that celebrate lots of different diverse things. Like, we've got Riverside Arts Market going on. We usually have some form of a festival going on. There's lots of places to get your kids out and do some boredom busting in Jacksonville that doesn't require a lot of financial investment, and still keeps your kids, seeing different aspects of life. And I think that's such an amazing opportunity that families who embrace that really enjoy. But if you haven't tried any of our festivals, or going to any of the, like, art walks or things like that with your children, farmers market, you can find us at the Nocatee Farmers Market when it's happening. You can find us at
Atlantic Beach Art Walk.
Atlantic Beach Art Walk. You can find us down at the Riverside Arts Market. My kids get to sample different foods, meet different families from different areas of Jacksonville, and we always seem to run into somebody we know, no matter what. We call Jacksonville the 13th grade, because if you've been here for a minute, you're going to keep running into people that you know if you're getting out there. So,
well, our running joke at my house is that Kate really does know everywhere we go. Kate knows somebody. But lately, if I run into someone, my husband is always like, oh, look, you're like Kate now. Slowly, it's happening. But it's the more you put yourself out and try all of those different things too. I feel like you start.
We call it the tribe vibe at my house. That's something, Jacksonville has a tribe vibe, and it doesn't mean that we all are in the same tribe, but you can find your mom tribe in Jax if you're willing to put yourself out there. And it takes a village doesn't make sense to you until you're a parent. And then all of a sudden you realize doing it on your own is just an impossible feat. So I love that there's the tribe vibe in Jax. And if you find your tribe, you're set, no matter where you go, what you want to do, and what issues you have that arise.
I love it. Great answers. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close up for today?
I don't think so. We're just really excited for this opportunity to chat with you, and also just for, we've been in private practice about a little over a year now, I think. And we're really grateful for all of the stuff that we've been able to do and have the opportunities we've had in Jacksonville. And it's been really, it's been a really awesome ride, and we're excited to keep it going.
Very exciting. Well, thank you so much to Kate and Amanda, and we will put links to Bold Child Co. as well as everything else we discussed today in the show notes so people can find you easily. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode of Jacksonville Momcast, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us at Jacksonville Momcast on all the social medias for show updates and more information about our guests. To learn more about what you heard today, visit our show notes at jacksonvillemomcast.com. Thanks for listening.